Hello, my name is Sadie, and if you are here for my TikTok, thank you so much for coming. And if you are not here for my TikTok, I run a BookTok account, Sadie Reads, where I talk about books. And I have been creating content on TikTok for about 2 years now, and I have truly been on every side of BookTok, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I have definitely fallen victim to the popular book cycle where I have read books that are super hyped on the app. So I think I am uniquely qualified to speak on this topic. And speak on it I will. I have a lot to say. So I have 5 books today that are absolutely worth your time. I have 5 that are quite literally for the birds. And I have 4 that I'm just gonna quickly mention that I'm kind of on the fence about. I'm gonna start out with a super controversial one, My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Some people love this, some people hate it, but I feel like most people are apathetic towards it. Personally, I devoured this book. I could not put it down, which seems weird because most people think it's boring, but I found the narrator's voice to be so compelling. And maybe it was because I was reading mostly fantasy at the time, which tends to be more plot driven. So to read something that was so intensely character focused just felt really fresh and new. But beyond that, I found this book to be really funny. I was giggling like a little girl at certain points, and I don't really do that in books. And I also really think it's a satirical look on how historically women and mental illness has been treated. I did a video on my TikTok about how I related this to Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper, and something called The Rest Cure. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. But I think this really transcends the bounds of what we've come to understand as literature. It's giving Duchamp's The Fountain, if you know what I mean. Okay, next up is The Cruel Prince. This is my favorite of what I like to refer to as the TikTok Big Four fantasy, which is like ACOTAR, Six of Crows, From Blood and Ash, and The Cruel Prince. I personally find The Cruel Prince to have the most substance and the best writing out of those 4, and I think Jude is the most complex and compelling of all of the main characters. If you know me, you know I am not a huge fan of romance or fantasy romance, so I really enjoyed how Holly Black explored Jude and other relationships that she had in her life, like her and her sister, her and her father. And Jude's story wasn't reduced to a simple romance. She was a real character with motivations and compulsions outside of her romantic interests. She was dynamic, she was compelling, and she was deliciously morally gray, and I love that in my fantasy. And this series was another one that I just absolutely tore through. You can see all of my annotations in just the first book. So next up we have Cersei, and where do I even begin with this book? Reading this book felt like sitting around a campfire listening to someone tell their life story. Growing up, I was obsessed with Greek mythology, and with the popularization of Greek myth retellings, I am disappointed in the vast majority of them. Mostly due to lack of research or just the complete disregard for the essence of the original myth. I do feel like there's a very fine line that contemporary retellings have to walk between preserving the original myth and, making it new and fresh. But Cersei absolutely nails it. Without damaging the integrity of Cersei's original story, Miller gives her a new voice. She breathes life into her story, and she gives us a perspective that we have never heard from before. She really reclaims Cersei's story in a way that is positively spellbinding. This is an absolute masterpiece, and I'm so excited because I hear that Madeline Miller is actually doing a Persephone retelling. Next on the list is Bunny by Mona Awad. Now, I listened to this originally on audiobook, and I definitely need to go back and give the physical book a read because I think it's going to add to my experience so much more. But much like My Year of Rest and Relaxation, I read this in the midst of my fantasy obsession, so it was definitely very shocking and exciting to read something so fresh and new. I have never and have still never even come close to experiencing another book quite like Bunny before. It's hard to even talk about because it's so fucking weird, but Bunny just captures everything I love about art and literature. In a world where it seems impossible to be truly original because every thought has been thought, every idea has been expressed, Bunny exists, and it just proves that you can do something truly unique and original that breaks all of the boundaries that you thought you knew. And last on my list of books that are popular on BookTok that I think you have to read, you all saw this coming, it is The Poppy War. This book single-handedly ruined all other fantasy for me because nothing has ever come close to doing what The Poppy War did to me, ever. By that I mean going beyond the classic epic fantasy tale of good versus evil, hero versus villain, yada yada yada. It actually dove into some really intense and important topics, and it went beyond the plot. Like, after I put down this book, I just sat and wrote pages and pages of my thoughts and feelings. I think this series is a must read if you enjoy adult fantasy, and I think it's really important to go into this understanding the political and the historical context of the book, because I just don't think you'll get the full experience if you don't. If that's something that you're interested in, I will either do a video or I will share my Google Doc all about this book, because I wrote a lot. And now we're going to get into the books that I do not think are worth your time. Again, this is my personal opinion. I don't have quite as much to say about these, but I'm going to shit talk them a little bit because it's fun. So first up, we have From Blood and Ash. This, like a year or two ago, was the most hyped book on BookTok. Everybody was reading it. I fell victim to it. I bought it. I read it. And it was awful. The writing is terrible. The plot, the characters, and the world building are utterly unoriginal. And the romance is cringy as fuck. I hated this, and I'm ashamed to admit that I purchased it and wasted my tabs tabbing it. Next up is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This book broke all of its promises and is probably the reason why I have trust issues with BookTok. It was supposed to be this emotional and epic tale of a woman cursed to live forever, but nobody remembers her name, which is an amazing premise, but I just think V.E. Schwab could have done so much more with this concept, and unfortunately, I just don't think she's a good enough writer to have executed what she wanted to do with this book. In the end, it was substanceless, it was boring, and it was really repetitive. Next up is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, I don't have a physical copy of this book because I read it on my Kindle. This is a thriller, and quite honestly, I was not thrilled at any point during this book. What makes a good thriller, in my opinion, is being able to self-insert. So I have to be able to put myself in the shoes of the narrator in order to be thrilled or scared or in any sort of suspense. But the plot is so ridiculous and the writing is so unconvincing that it was almost laughable. Like, at no point in this book can I believe the situation that our main character was in. Like, there was weird romance, like everything. The main plot point was just so unbelievable to me. And the twist, please, if you're gonna do a twist, at least commit to it. You know what I mean? Next up is A Little Life. Much like Addie LaRue, I feel like this book was trying really hard to elicit an emotional response out of the reader, and in my opinion, good literature doesn't need to try, it just is. When I find myself getting emotional while reading, it's when I stumble across these little moments of pure relatability where I feel like the author has literally stripped back my flesh and taken a look into my beating heart and soul. And with A Little Life, the events and the trauma are so unrelatable, so over the top, that it kind of becomes a bad caricature. It loses its humanity, and it's just a book where all of the worst possible things happen to one character. And in that way, I feel like it's a little bit exploitative and a little bit offensive. The author herself has admitted to doing little to no research on the characters and their trauma, and it shows. It's shallow, most of it's for shock value, and ultimately it's just poor writing. Lastly, we have Normal People. And I don't have much to say about this book, which basically says it all. It's just a try-hard novel about two young people, normal people, if you will, navigating a complex yet realistic relationship. But in the end, it's just boring. And it's trying really hard to be revolutionary and do something new in literature, and I think it just misses the mark. There's not a single interesting take in this book, but I am honestly, out of all of these, willing to give Sally Rooney another chance. So lastly, I just have 4 books that I want to mention that I didn't love and I didn't hate, but some other people might enjoy them. So I'm going to go through them really quickly. First up, If We Were Villains. Next, ACOTAR. And then The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I don't know where my physical copy is. And lastly, 6 of Crows. And that's it. If there is a book on this list that you didn't see, it might be because I just haven't read it yet, but comment other popular BookTok books that you want to hear my opinion on, and I will either talk about them if I've read them or try to read them, maybe. I don't know, probably not. I hope you enjoyed this. I plan on making more videos in the future, so if you would like, you can also comment on some other stuff that you would like to see from me. And again, thank you from the bottom of my little shriveled heart for watching this video. Bye!